Welcome to my crafting channel at Upcycling NZ. Let's get into some vintage and Victorian upcycles. Project number 1. I thrifted these big curtain rings. They're the type that go on a big dowel rod. They were only $2 for a big bag. And I have some images from the 1800s. These are going to become little picture frames, so I'm going to draw around some stiff cardboard and cut out circles to form the backing. The pictures I'm using today are actually very historical. They're of Princess Vicky, who was Queen Victoria's daughter, and Prince Fritz, whose father was William I, the Emperor of Prussia. Now I'll cut around the pictures. I'm going to show you 2 of these, but I actually made 5 of them in total, and I'll show you the rest a little further on in the video. So an interesting fact was that Princess Victoria was only 14 years old when Prince Fritz put his proposal forward to Queen Victoria, and it was accepted. They have words for that these days. Alright, now that I have these cut down to size, I'm going to glue them to the card with some Mod Podge, and I'm going to put a layer over the top as well. I want to get a little bit of protection for the front of the picture. Now I'm taking some acrylic house paint. This is some salvaged exterior interior black paint. I got this and several other quality paints that have been saved from the rubbish tip. And sometimes you can pick up paints very cheap from thrift stores. It'll save you an absolute fortune, and you can always mix 2 colours together to create something that you like better. So I've given these 2 coats of black, and now I'm going to take some metallic gold finish paint, which is a folk art product. And I'm taking a very small amount on the end of my finger, and I'm just going to rub that around one side of my curtain ring. Now I'll go back and put a second coat of Mod Podge on my pictures. I want them to have a slight shine, even though this is a satin finish Mod Podge. It does have a little bit of a sheen to it. To attach my photographs to the back of the frames, I'm using PVA glue or white glue, and I've got it in a small squeezy bottle so that I can put a bead all the way around the outside of my curtain ring and just place the photographs, and I'm making sure they line up nicely with that hanger at the top. Then I'll place these on some greaseproof paper and put a bit of weight on them and let them dry. So can you imagine being 14 years old and told that you're going to marry some grown-up man? Luckily for Princess Vicky, Fritz was a pretty hot looking guy. He was tall and fair. I'm painting the backs in black, and I'm going to be adding a little bit of text to the back of these, and it tells a little bit of the story of the romance between these 2. So Fritz did end up becoming the Emperor of Prussia on his father's death, but he was already gravely ill with some kind of throat cancer, so his reign only lasted for 99 days. I put an extra layer of Mod Podge over the text to protect it, and here's my 5 finished frames. I'll mount these on a length of black ribbon, and I have a little brass keyring ring which I'll use for the hanger at the top, and I'm just hot gluing the ribbon to itself. You could use any old pictures for this project, but old family photos would be fantastic. Then you could hand this down through the family like an heirloom. I'll space my frames out along the ribbon, and I've found these giant bra eyelets things. I don't know where I got them from, but they're going to be ideal for this project. I'm going to sew them to my ribbon, and then they'll be nice and secure. I wonder if these were maybe used to make corsets and things to run ribbon through. It's possible. So now I've got my 5 attached, and I'm taking some coffee dyed lace, and this one was a yellow colour before I coffee dyed it, and I'm tying 5 little shoelace bows. I'll tie my frames to the giant bra eyelets with a little piece of twine. I'll add my little lace bow in, and then I'll tie a bow with the twine. I'll trim off any excess lace, and this project's done. Moving on to project number 2, and we're going to recycle this old shoebox that I got from one of my students at work. I want to line the inside of this box, so I've got some coffee dyed papers, and these ones have those old looking lines all over them. I think they're used for writing music. I'm removing most of the straight edges and the punch holes because I don't know if they had ring binders back in the 1800s. If you know, let me know because I'm curious. I'm going to add some PVA glue to the inside of my box and start to apply pieces all over the inside. I had to work my way around the little hole at the end of the box there, so I've cut the hole to size, and I found that the trick was to line the hole up first and worry about the rest of the paper afterwards. You'll see I'm using a little plastic spatula to push all of the air bubbles out and any excess glue. That way I ended up with very few wrinkles in my decoupage. Once I'd completely lined the inside of the box and allowed it to dry, I added a coat of Mod Podge all over. I also completed that whole process on the lid. So in keeping with the music theme, I'm taking some pages out of my music book. I absolutely love this book and I've made so many projects out of it. I guess it's just another way of appreciating books. Now I'll continue on with my decoupage process using PVA glue all over the outside of the box and applying these pages to cover it all. I found it easiest to line up the very sides of the box to cover the lip and then to work my way inwards from there. The corners were a bit trickier, so I just added a piece to the top of the box, and then I made cuts towards the corners of the box, ensuring that the flaps that were left folded over each other nicely. Again, I allowed that to dry and I completed the whole process again on the bottom of the box. Next, I'm going to select one of these beautiful images that I got from the Temu website. Aren't they absolutely beautiful? These vintage Victorian and steampunk looking images in this set. Honestly, this was so hard to decide that I ended up just going with the first one that I liked, and purely because I had to make a decision about it. Each image is exactly half of the page, so I can just fold it over and cut down the seam. This is going to sit in the centre of the top of the box. I want to add a little muted colour, so I'm taking these beautiful images also from the Temu website. I'll fussy cut around the flowers, and I'm not sure if these are roses or peonies as we say here in New Zealand, or peonies as I've heard other people pronounce it. What do you reckon? Let me know in the comments. So I've cut out several of these and I'll put them aside for the moment. For now I'm just figuring out where I want the image to go. Then I'm taking this vintage stencil and I'll only be using the border of this. I'll take some of my black paint again and I'm offloading most of the paint from a very hard bristled brush. Then I'm stippling the paint onto my stencil using a straight up and down motion. If the paint isn't dark enough for you, just keep stippling over top and layering. And the part I love, revealing the stencil. I'm a lot more confident these days in my stenciling. Next I'm going to mark the oval on the back of my picture, and I had 2 goes at this to cut it to the right size to fit inside that frame. I'm using Mod Podge to attach this gorgeous lady to my project. I'll start with a section at the top and then I'll work my way down the rest of the photograph. Once that's down, I'll put a coat of Mod Podge over the top as well. What do you think of that plunging neckline on this lady's dress for the time period? I'm thinking she must have been a lady of the night. I got called a lady of the night once by my CEO, who got highly embarrassed because I work graveyard shifts. I'm using Mod Podge again, and if you find that your images aren't exactly the way you want them, don't be afraid to layer them. I had to do that with my other flower because I wanted more green leaves, so I just took a separate piece and just laid that underneath my flower. I'll apply some of the flowers to the inside of the box as well. I'm actually going to be using this for storage, so I won't see them, but if you were going to give this away as a gift, it's a nice idea. I went ahead and put a coat of Mod Podge all around the inside of the box and the lid. Totally forgetting that I'd already done that until I was editing the audio. I'll use some clear wax along with my antiquing wax. This is a Feast & Watson clear wax, and it's a soft wax product. And I'm using the Folk Art antiquing wax, and I'll mix the two because I don't want to go too dark on it. I'll apply it with a sponge that I've cut off, a scouring sponge that you buy for the kitchen. These are great. I can make about 9 of them out of a sponge and use them for all sorts of projects. Now I'm just going to apply this to all of the edges and everywhere that I think it would naturally age. Antiquing wax is such an amazing product, don't you think, regardless of who the manufacturer is. I used a small paintbrush to get it right into the corners. I absolutely love how this box is turning out. What do you think of it? Let me know in the comments, or give me a thumbs up if you're liking it. And here's how it's looking. The only other addition I make to this is I add a little label holder onto the front. And now this is ready to add to my box stack of storage. Alright, we're up to project number 3. This is a relatively easy project. This is one of those frameless frames held together by these ornate corner pieces. It has a velvet backing, and this is going to help me to make this modern piece look much, much older. I've cleaned the glass up, and I think this frame cost me all of $1 from the thrift store. They're pretty easy to pick up. Back to making a hard decision about which picture to use. I'll use another beautiful lady though. It's really important for this project that you do not get fingerprints all over the side of the glass that your picture's going on. Now I'm going to draw around the picture on the front of the frame. This is the glass that will be to the outside of the frame, just so that I know what area the picture is going to be sitting in. Now I'm taking some gold metallic finish acrylic paint. This is a Folk Art product, and I'll offload some paint and sponge brush that to the inside of the glass. I want my inside edge to be lighter and kind of feathered out a little. Then I'll work my way to the outer edge and feather it out again, leaving a section all the way around the outside of the frame. You can use any metallic paint or mirror finish for this. You could also use any other paint colour, as long as you started with the light one first, because next I'm going to take black and I'm going to fill in those edges. I'm not going all the way to the edge of the gold on the inside of the frame though. I think the black really defines the edge of the frame once I turn it over. That looks amazing, and don't worry, we'll be removing that black felt pen line. I'll use Mod Podge to attach my picture, and this time when decoupaging we're going to attach it by the front of the image. And I'm putting quite a generous coat on, because once I apply it to my glass I'm going to push out any excess Mod Podge and any air bubbles. I believe this is what they call reverse decoupage. So I'm using a plastic spatula to press all that glue out. It's really important that there are no air bubbles underneath. But I guess if you do get some, it could just add to the aged look. If you were using a thinner decoupage paper or a transparent serviette, you would need to paint the back of the image in white to really make it pop. And once it's dry, it just looks stunning. I'll use a bit of Terps to get my vivid marker off. You could use any kind of marker that's easier to remove if you prefer. So this project just goes to show you that you don't have to buy expensive mirror finishes necessarily, and you can get a similar effect. Now with the backing, I'm going to remove all of that dirt and fluff, and I'll use just some wide packing tape for that. If you have stubborn stains, a wet wipe's great for removing them off velvet. This is such an easy thrift flip, and you can get such a variety of outcomes using different pictures and different paints. If you have a retail space, I would try this out and see how they sell. I know I'll be looking out for these frameless frames whenever I'm at the thrift store from now on. So now I'm just assembling it back together, and this one's done. Let me know what you think in the comments, and tell me if you have any other suggestions for these frames. Moving on to project number 4. Now this is a piano roll. These were made for those automatic pianos that play away without needing a musician. Isn't it gorgeous? I got this for $4 from a thrift store, and I thought it might be more than 100 years old because the box is really aged and a little bit damaged. But it turns out I looked it up and it's a 1944 piano roll made in Australia. These are great for use in crafts, but what I'm going to do to this one is I'm going to repair the box, and I'll use a little bit of coffee dyed music paper for this. I may end up using the roll itself for some projects, so in the meantime I'm just going to make that box look so much more interesting. I'll use some antiquing wax on my little rectangles of paper, and these are going to go on the inner 4 corners to hold the box together. I'll put a wee crease halfway in each of these, and then I'm going to use some masking tape to hold that ripped edge together. I'll use PVA glue to glue them in, and I'll put one in each corner to help secure the box together. There you go, it serves a purpose and it looks really cute. I have developed a real love for everything vintage and Victorian since I've had this YouTube channel. I think I'm going to have a lot of faux artifacts and curiosities in my home long term. The paper I'm using has some awesome staining from the sellotape that was used in this old book. I'm going to use it to create somewhat of a faux label for the front of the box. Of course, I'm going to age the edges. I'm also going to add some antiquing wax to the scuffed edges of the box. That'll just give it a nice waxy drink, and it'll help to protect it a little bit. Now I can add my pieces of paper, and I'm just doing that with PVA glue. There's 2 little finger cutouts on the side of the box, right about in the middle, so I'm going to put a piece of paper either side of those. For every layer of wax and glue and eventually Mod Podge that I put on this, it's going to ensure that this box continues to survive for another 60 years. I want to bridge the gap in the middle between the 2 pieces of paper, so I'm going to make a wax seal. And I'm going to fake it by using some hot glue. And I put a 50-cent piece, this is a New Zealand coin, in the freezer so it's nice and cold, and I'll pop that on top. Squeeze the wax out the sides to get those lovely billowy bits around the edges, and I'll take it off before that's set completely. And while my hot glue is still warm, I'm taking some exterior gloss in a vivid red and I'm going to paint it. And because it's warm, it's going to dry pretty quickly, and then I can put a second coat on. Oh, I forgot to say that you need to do this on grease-proof paper. I think that's going to do the trick. It mimics the wax seal quite well. I'll peel it off and remove any excess paint from around the edges. And then I'm just going to use PVA glue to glue that down. I'll add a little bit of antiquing wax to darken that red off and to give that seal a bit of definition. Wow, that looks so good. So as a bit of an afterthought, I'm going to add a little bit of leather thong or leather string. I'll start to glue the centre to the lower half of my project. Then I'm going to add quite a lot of glue because I'm going to put another piece of paper over the top of this. I could have done this on my original piece of paper if I'd thought of it earlier. That's alright though, I'll just add another piece over top. I don't want my thonging to move at all, so I'm going to make sure that that glue goes right up to the edges of it underneath that paper, and do the same to the sides. I'll let all of that dry, and I'm taking some more of that leather string or leather thong, and I'm going to attach it to the roll itself on the inside. Then I can wind it around a couple of times and tie a little bow on the top. I'm going to cover the whole box inside and out with Mod Podge, but before I do that I'm going to add a bit of aging to all of the edges to make it look even older than it already was. This project would look awesome in a vignette with some old books and maybe some birds' nests. One of my subscribers, Elaine, has a curiosities table. I love that she has one, and I want one of them myself one day. So there's space on the top of my box to add a label when and if I continue with this project doing something with the inside. Now I can just tie a bow with the leather thonging and it will hold the box together, and this is ready to go if I use it again for a future project, or I can leave it the way it is. For project number 5, we're going to make some vintage Victorian looking hang tags. I'm going to use these in my retail space. I'm going to start with some really heavy waste cardboard, and I'll use my little guillotine to get some really nice accurate rectangular shapes. I'll be using lots of waste materials and leftover craft products in this project. I'll recycle a paperback book cover, and I'm going to paste that with PVA glue to the side of my rectangles which are unusable. And I've stacked my rectangles behind it so that I can put as many as I can onto this piece of card. I'll be using a plastic spatula to push out any air bubbles and excess glue. Then I flipped over my piece of card and I repositioned some of them so I can cut around them easily. That took care of some of my rectangles, and I set that aside to dry. For some of my tags I'm going to use some lined coffee dyed paper, and I'll attach that to some of my tags that have a light side that will not show underneath it. Basically what I'll do for all of my tags today is create a writable side and a decoratable side. Next I'll cut out my rectangles, and a lot of these still have a side which needs to be worked on. I'll be painting the sides I have left, but before I do that I'm going to cut the tags into shapes, and you can do this one of two ways. You could measure out your cuts and make them a little bit more accurate, I did this for the first tag, but I'm making an awful lot of these, so I'm going to freehand the rest. I'm using a hole punch to put in a hole for the top of the tags, and I'm going to cut all sorts of different shapes and sizes. Next, I'll paint any remaining sides in my homemade chalk paints. I'll be leaving a link in the description below if you want to know how I made these beautiful paints and colours. I'm not going to show you all of the colours that I used on film, but I ended up with a huge variety and I mass produced these. Now they're ready to decorate. So I've run out of ink in my ink pad, so as a solution I'm taking some printing ink, which is a water soluble ink that I had in my stash, and I'm mixing it with a little bit of water and I'm refilling my stamp pad with that. I ended up using far too much ink, so I started to paper towel some of the ink off and kept testing it until I had it working the way I wanted it. So now I can start to create to my heart's content, and I'll use a variety of different stamps, so I'll just let you watch. Next, I have a really large variety of small transfers, and they're all cut down to small sizes and they won't last very long kicking around like that. So let's use a lot of these up. I'll start by just trimming them down to size. Then with these transfers you just take off the backing or peel back the backing, lay it on your surface, and then you rub your image on with a plastic spatula. You can do it with your fingernail too, but I always like to use this because I can get some real pressure going. It will start to lift, and then you lift up one side and start to work your way back, making sure that you have your image down. If it isn't down, just lay it back down and keep rubbing. Then you take the backing sheet and just apply pressure and burnish the rest of the image on. I'm layering and adding bits and pieces and adding text all over these, and you can just let your creativity run wild really. Now I need to add some age to my hang tags, and I'm going to take some antiquing wax and apply that around the edges of all of the tags. I think people will be able to appreciate the amount of work that's gone in each and every one of these and how handmade they are. And here's the difference that antiquing wax makes. These are still only some of the tags, so hopefully I cover them all eventually during the video. I'll just let you watch. For some of them I'm going to use white wax. I just apply that in the same way using a clean sponge. And to finish these off, I'm going to add some little black ribbons to some of them and some jute twine hangers to the rest. This kind of project is an immense amount of fun, and I'll show you at the end how some of them look and how I use them. Well, that's it for me for this week. If you haven't before, please consider pushing all the buttons and doing all the things. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you guys. And don't forget, I have memberships, or you could follow me on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook or Pinterest. I've been Alana. Bye for now.